So we're looking here at part 25 of our theory and practice focus on hydrotherapy. And just a reminder that as you navigate any health challenge, it's always recommended you partner with a medical practitioner who shares your philosophy of care, both in health and disease. The things we talk about are things that other people have used that you can put into your wellness toolbox and use when needed. But they should be practiced because sometimes they take some significant doing, especially things that are not a pharmacological agent, but using things like hydrotherapy. They take consistent use over time, and just investigate anything and not blindly accept them, so that you don't know what they are. Don't do them. You need to investigate it and don't just take it blindly. Thomas Edison said back in January of 1903 that the doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will instruct his patient in the care of the human frame and diet and in the cause and prevention of disease. We don't really see that happening very often at all today, more so maybe than in years past, but mainstream hasn't received that. It's still a thing of the future as far as I can tell. Back in 1885, even prior to that, it was stated in Testimonies for the Church that there are many ways of practicing the healing art, but there's only one way that heaven approves. God's remedies are the simple agencies of nature that won't tax or debilitate the system through their powerful properties. So it's basically stating here that there's powerful properties in pure air and pure water. There's powerful properties in cleanliness. There's powerful properties in proper diet and in purity of life and trusting God. So those are all powerful properties. But many are dying because they don't have those things or aren't using them. They don't go out of date, except if we don't use them, like many things. So that's the only way they would go out of date. And the skillful use of them has been lost because they haven't been used. But they aren't expensive with respect to supplies and that kind of thing. But drugs are expensive both in their cost and their taxing on the body's physiology. In 3 John 1 verse 2, it says, "Beloved, I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health just as your soul prospers." And we just want to make sure that we do seek after the soul's health, our mind and our spirit, through our relationship with Jesus. Romans 12, 1 and 2 says, "I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice." So it's by the mercies of God, holy and acceptable, which is your reasonable service. So he wants us, and it's very reasonable for us to ask the Lord to share his mercies or shower his mercies on us so that we can present our bodies that way. And do not be conformed to this world, and do not be transformed, but be renewed by your mind, and that you prove whatever is that good and acceptable, perfect will of God. So this is the will of God in Romans 12, 1 and 2. The knowledge that man is to be a temple for God, which we know about from Corinthians, where it talks about our bodies being a temple of the Holy Spirit, a habitation for the revealing of his glory, should be the highest incentive to the care and development of our physical powers. So it's our mental, our physical. We are fearfully and wonderfully made as the Creator has made us in the human frame, and he asks us to make it our study, understand its needs, and act our part in preserving it from harm and defilement. So we're going to look at an aspect of hydrotherapy here called partial bath hydrotherapy. And one of the key components of that is contrast bathing, hot and cold. So you're immersing an appendage, that is an arm or a leg, into water in the proximal or distal region. So proximal is closer to the core of the body. Distal is going to be at the outer extremities. So hand, wrist, calf, foot would be distal versus proximal, shoulder, knee, thigh would be closer to the core of the body. And the picture here shows a nice little stool there in a nice area that won't get too wet from water on the ground, but it has those nice tanks there that the person could sit between and put their whole arm in up to their shoulder practically in those tanks. That's a pretty specialized system, but it's a very nice way of showing a good way of doing hydrotherapy. So the benefits of contrast bathing, also known as hot and cold, is the hot and cold aspect of it is very important. So you're alternating plunging into different temperatures, into cold water, then into hot water. So you're doing hot to cold, and essentially that does vasoconstriction, vasodilation, and essentially works as another heart and pumps the blood around the body, drawing it from places distant, and then shoving it away, taking toxins and things with it. So that's what it does. It functions as and how your heart functions too. It takes and circulates blood around the body, which, number one, it delivers nutrients and oxygen to the cells, but also removes waste and metabolic byproducts and toxins. So that increases the tissue perfusion of the blood into those areas that they're working on. It also functions to elevate red blood cells and white blood cells in the region. So typically, if you have some kind of inflammation, you do have a need for red blood cells and white blood cells to come into those areas and do their jobs. So some of the benefits, this is a way to do it at home with a kitchen sink that is divided. So this person is doing that up to their elbows in a kitchen sink. You can go from hot to cold to hot to cold. You can do it with dish pans as well. So it's helpful for the hands, arms, feet, and legs, particularly for arthritis types like rheumatoid and osteoarthritis. So for arthritis, it basically helps improve the circulation of the area. And again, that brings white blood cells. It also takes waste products away, but also brings nutrients in. So you want to be sure you're supplying your body with the adequate nutrients to repair damaged tissue, because our body is capable of doing that. Helpful for fractures to increase the rate of healing, so healing faster. So you can use that along with comfrey, things like that to speed the healing action, because you're just increasing your circulation, increasing the nutrient delivery. 24 hours post-trauma, so injury to a particular area. Congestive headache. So congestive headache would basically be due to sinuses being congested with mucus, one of the body's defense mechanisms for trying to isolate bacteria, and then you expel it and get it out of your body. Sprains and strains, other types of infections, such as gangrenous type infections, or even other types of infections. Indolent ulcers, compromised venous circulation. So the particularly in the lower extremity of the legs, that's where you see varicose veins and veins not being able to deliver or return the blood as efficiently in many people. But the contrast bathing can aid that process. And then lymphangitis, which is essentially just lymph glands that are inflamed. So do that 2 to 3 times a day, the contrast baths or plunge. So what do you need? You're going to need 2 containers, one for hot, one for cold. And it's going to be completely based upon the area that you're treating. So this individual here is doing a ankle treatment of cold and hot. It looks like they could actually almost do all the way up to their calf. You may want to have some like 5-gallon buckets around, because that would allow you to get deeper water. These could be deep, but it's going to take a higher volume than a 5-gallon bucket. Some people may not be able to use a 5-gallon bucket just because their feet are big, but smaller feet, you could probably get, a smaller person could probably get up to the knee and immerse the knee even. If the wound is open, you want to use some kind of antiseptic in the water just to prevent, just hedge off any infection possibilities. You want a thermometer, like a bath thermometer. So the one in the picture down below shows temperatures in Fahrenheit and Celsius, and gives you some temperature ranges that you can use. There are lots of different types of thermometers that could be used for that. A bath towel for drying, a pitcher for adding of water. So you could be adding hot water to your hot bath as it cools over the period of your activity. As you swap baths, you can increase the temperature or at least keep it maintained at a hot temperature. When you put your cold foot back in, it's going to cool the water down a bit just by virtue of having a cold body placed into it. Water has a high heat capacity, so it doesn't change temperature super rapidly, but you do want to help keep it steady or at least increased. ice cubes for the cold water to help maintain its cold, because again, you're moving a hot body from the hot foot bath over to the cold side. And then a cold compress or ice bag, especially if you're doing like a compression or congestion kind of a issue, or you're doing a large portion of the body, you could have your body heating up, and that can just help cool the body during that period of time. So application of this to a partial area. So you're alternating hot and cold. You want to submerge the limb into a hot water, about 105 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And that range is given. You can, 110 is the kind of upper end of that, but you can do 105, 103, 105, 110. So you can do it in a series of gradually increasing increments. This person here has 1 foot in the cold, 1 foot in the hot. I'm not quite sure how they're going to do the switcheroo. That could be interesting in this picture, but they have just treating the bottom of their feet or their toes in this particular case. So your 3 to 4 minute hot water submersion, and then plunge it into cold tap or ice water. And you can make it colder over time. You can start with tap and then work down with the ice being added to it for 30 seconds to 1 minute. And you may notice that as you put it in first, you kind of have that quenching shock, and then it kind of goes numb, and you can go a little bit longer. But then move back to your hot water. So start with hot water, end with cold. You're going to change back and forth 6 to 8 times, or 3 to 4 cycles. So a cycle would be hot, cold. So 3 to 4 minutes of hot. You want to step the temperatures up through the treatment, so help it be hotter. So that's why you have your pitcher of hot water nearby. So you're adding more to it. That's vasodilating greater. So as you increase the distance between the temperatures, you have a greater reaction that takes place. And then 30 seconds to 1 minute of cold, with the rest 30 minutes post-treatment. So with any hydrotherapy, you're going to be resting for at least half an hour to an hour after the hydrotherapy, or you can end up negating the benefits of having done the therapy. So you may need to use a cold compress if the person warms up to the point where they need to have their head or neck cooled. This is particularly true in cases where a large body area is being treated, or if a person feels faint. So this is where the person who's helping out needs to pay attention. And if you're doing it on yourself, you should have the supplies nearby in case you are paying attention. If a person has heart issues, especially if their heart moves up to 180 beats per minute rather, and above, you want to get an ice bag over the heart and check the pulse every 5 minutes, just so you have an idea of what the heart rate is. So you're going to be at rest, you're not at active. So your heart rate shouldn't be moving up above that or to that area. Some people have an inherently higher heart rate due to inactivity and sedentary lifestyle. A resting heart rate of someone who's fit can be 50, 56, something like that. And then kind of moving up from there. So to keep the water at or below 110 degrees Fahrenheit. If you have a person who has vascular disease, don't go above 105 degrees. But for most people who don't have vascular disease, 110 degrees or below. If they have vascular disease, 105 and below. And that's Fahrenheit. Diabetics and people with peripheral vascular disease, you're going to use contrast, but not high temperature contrasts, simply because they have neurological issues that deaden their ability to respond to those temperatures as well. If you're doing someone who has rheumatoid arthritis, end with hot versus cold. So you're not going to do a cold quench. You'll keep them vasodilated at the end. So 3 specific contrast baths with some notations about them. The hand or arm, you want the water as hot as possible. It helps particularly in blood poisoning and nosebleeds. So if someone has a nosebleed, you can do a hand or arm hot water immersion to help stop the nosebleed. So essentially what that's doing is vasodilating in the hands and having a place for the blood to go, and it's drawing the blood from the nose area and helps to slow down the nosebleed. by drawing it to another part of the body that is demanding it, which in this case would be a hand. Feet, congestive headaches, so a cold compress to the head and then hot water to the feet. Also foot infections, gangrene, tuberculosis of the ankle. In the legs, immerse the legs to the knees, a cold compress to the head, and possibly the heart. So the legs, you want to do 2 to 3 minutes of hot, 20 to 30 seconds of cold for a 5 to 30 minute treatment, depending on how many rotations you do. If you have an ulcer or someone with varicose veins, you want to do a short treatment, 1 minute. So it's great for edema in the legs. 2 to 3 rotations, you're going to add ice to the cold and end with a vigorous friction rub. Remember that in the end, when you have cold, the friction accentuates the reaction to the cold. And that's a benefit of doing that. So some special situations, osteoarthritis is a special situation. You want to start with 110 degrees Fahrenheit water for 4 minutes. So that's a longer time. And then change to tap water for 1 minute and do 4 to 6 rotations of hot, cold. So you want to end hot. So again, this is like rheumatoid arthritis in that you're ending hot, gradually raising the temperature to 120 degrees. So this is a special situation. The tap water, you want to cool gradually, adding ice. So essentially you're creating a larger difference between the hot and the cold by adding hot water and adding ice and icing the water more. You want to do that treatment 2 times a day. So this radiograph here, you can see the leg muscle and the shades of gray up around the bone. The healthy normal knee joint is on the left, and one that has been compromised by osteoarthritis is on the right. So there aren't the smooth surfaces. It's kind of spongy looking along the lateral edges of the femur articulating with the tibia. You can see that there's erosion that's taken place on the ends of the bone there, and the articular cartilage has been worn away. So cellulitis or other types of infections, as large a difference between the hot and cold as possible in the beginning, beginning with 110 up to tolerance. So the person on the right has a very inflamed area, cellulitis, essentially inflammation of the cells of the skin. You want to start with ice water and end with ice water, and do that 5 to 6 rotations 2 to 3 times a day. So the person here on the right has an infection on their calf, looks like a bite of some kind or a boil. So using a 5-gallon bucket to get your leg in there up to your knee would be a good way to do that. So start with ice water and end with ice water, which is a different approach than the hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold. So in other types of situations like insufficient circulation and other blood vessel diseases, you're going to begin hot at 105 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's why it's important to have that bath thermometer so you know what your temperatures are. And do that for 3 minutes, and then cold for 30 seconds, and do a minimum of 3 rotations. So basically that's the standard is 3 rotations, but with these contrast elements here, it looks like it demonstrates up to 8 rotations. So a sprained ankle, 110 degree water, and then ice water, ending with ice water. And again, what that's doing is increasing circulation to the area, aiding the production of white blood cells and red blood cells, taking away the damaged metabolic byproducts of the damage, allowing the white blood cells come and the macrophages come to remove the damaged tissue and have that repair process be nourished and aided along by the movement of the blood through the area. Cold water alone prolongs pain and recovery time, and the contrast is more effective in the long run. So we talk about using an ice pack on things like sprains right away, but it turns out that a contrast hydrotherapy treatment would help that in the long run better. You may not always have just accessibility to that right away, but do it as soon as you can. So someone who has insufficient strength in their feet, or pronation, so pronation is where the feet kind of splay out as they're walking. So there isn't strength in the musculature that causes that excess of pronation. It can be helpful for that to do that same treatment, and also as an arthritis treatment. Actually use the arthritis treatment for that.